One more time. Hi, everyone. My name is Katya, and I'm a producer of the public program at Strelka Institute. I'm happy to welcome you all tonight to the public interview with Diann Bauer and Anna Engelhardt. Thank you for joining us at Strelka 2020 Live. I would like to introduce our speakers. Diann is an artist and a writer. She is also a member of Laboria Cubonics and the co-author of Xenofeminist manifesto and a member of the Alliance of the Southern Triangle, a working group of artists, architects, and curators focusing on urbanism and climate change. Diann is also working as a part of the team for the German pavilion for the 2020 Architectural Biennale in Venice. The interview will be taken by Anna Engelhardt, who is a digital artist and a decolonial researcher. She creates web platforms using infrastructure as a concept frame and a research method. Today, we're going to enjoy not only a profound conversation, but also a digital performance. The faces of Anna and Diann will be covered with masks, created by Anna in collaboration with an artist, Medina Bazargali. After the interview, we will have time to answer the questions from the audience, so please do not hesitate to post your questions on YouTube, Facebook, or Vkontakte. The lecture will be in English with a simultaneous translation into Russian. For the Russian translation, please open Strelka Institute's page on Vkontakte and Russian Facebook. English version is available on our YouTube and English Facebook. Anna, Diann, I will pass the word to you.
Thanks.
Thank you for the introduction. Hi, everyone. So we'll start with major conceptual questions and get more to the point later. So my first question for you, Diann, is going to be about time, the main topic of our talk today. In conventional terms, time is understood as having clear direction from past towards future, scale, measurable by human lifespan and perception would be an example taken into account like seconds or years, an agent navigating the time. So for instance, me looking at my phone now to check if we started at decided time. I think it would be productive to start with you elaborating on the relationship between the notions that are central for your work, time and temporality, along the lines of direction, scale, and agency.
Hi. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I mean, I think my interest in this thinking, I suppose, about the difference between time and temporality. The way that I would differentiate these things is I would, the way I speak about time would be time as it's understood in science, for example. So, like. Time, for example, in physics, like when you start to get to the quantum scale, time as we sort of understand it in a quotidian way doesn't make sense anymore. The directionality of time doesn't sort of hold. So for us humans, time has this stubbornly directional quality to it. As you said, going from past to future. And whereas this completely breaks down when you sort of get to the extremities of scale, either on the quantum or the cosmological. So my curiosity is what is this discrepancy about? What is this discrepancy between what time might actually be outside of our experience of it, and then this stubborn linearity? And to add to that, I mean, I think the question becomes all the more urgent now because of the scale that we are operating in sort of as a species. If we're operating in this global scale, we're sort of find ourselves in what's now what's now understood as the Anthropocene. Questions of what is deep time in relationship to this. So deep time has this sort of sits as like a median between the extremities of scale that I was speaking about, sort of the quantum or the cosmological and the quotidian experience of times. But so deep time would be still defined within anthropocentric terms. So it's still understood as sort of years. It's still understood in relationship to the earth, but is still well beyond the range of human experience, sort of sits in between these. So my interest in trying to get a handle on the sense of alien time, going to these extremes, is in a way to understand what our relationship is to this sort of median deep time, this time that is both alien as well as defined within the parameters of human experience, I suppose.
Would you mind to elaborate more on like Anthropocene and deep time? Because I feel these terms might not be necessarily known by the Russian audience.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the Anthropocene, I suppose, is there's quite a debate in terms of when you pinpoint where it began. I mean, some people say it, starts with human settlement and agriculture. Some people say it starts with the atom bomb. Some say it starts with the beginning of the fossil fuels, which, I mean, to me, that's sort of the one that resonates most. So you have this period of time where humans as a species have become a geological force on the planet. Sort of collectively, we actually systemically changing how Earth systems themselves operate. And it's sort of this funny double between, on one hand, we're responsible for it. Human technology and human global systems are responsible for this Earth system change, while at the same time it feels totally out of scale of any individual to have agency with regard to. So we're both responsible and feel totally out of our depth in relationship to it. It sort of has this double need to it. And I think that the deep time, we sort of now have this very intimate relationship to, I suppose, what is known as deep time, which is broadly speaking, time that is geological time. So the time of the planet. So it's this time scales that sort of Earth systems and geology moves at. So obviously well beyond the scale of human, but it's, as I said, still defined within sort of years and, diurnal cycles and sort of the relationship to the planet itself. But this, as I said, I do think this relationship to these alien timescales is becoming that much more urgent because, we've already cooked in change. So, we've been burning fossil fuels for 200 years, even if all fossil fuels stop being burnt now and we went, completely solar or whatever, there's already heat cooked into the system that needs to be dealt with, whether it's through, geoengineering or whatever. I mean, that's perhaps another conversation, but, it's the change already sort of cooked in is going to need to be dealt with, and this is directly related to these timescales of hundreds and even thousands of years.
Yeah, so I think basically this term. So can we talk maybe about? I think climate change would be useful as a case to kind of ground our conversation at the moment. So probably we can maybe discuss between the difference of like time and temporality in the sense of climate change. Like, can we say, because as far as I understand in your work, you understand time as like scientific time, different notions of time, which would be going from quantum physics, which would like therefore bring in like non-directional time, and like geological time or deep time can be also considered as scientific notion of time, and temporality, which would be like human perception of time and how we navigate time as like in phenomenological or like sensorical manner. So maybe we can think about like climate change and how climate change is navigated through, and how temporality is represented in climate change.
Well, I mean, I think one of the difficult problems, political problems, really, and I suppose like practical problems in taking on something like climate change is the fact that these timescales feel so remote. I mean, you don't necessarily feel like the urgency isn't. I mean, it's becoming more palpable, as we can sort of feel the changes. But it's because it's this series of small individual actions on a global scale that things sort of change or don't change. But I think to get humans to make commitments to scales of time that are well beyond their own lifetime that's sort of where the challenge is. Like, how do you make these timescales intimate and palpable and urgent enough for people to think, okay, I have a commitment to this, and even sort of extending the idea of commitment beyond sort of one's personal experience or personal lifetime or whatever, that it's possible to make commitments that aren't sort of aren't rooted in one's own personal interests. That sort of any sort of notion of collective commitment or collective agency, can and indeed needs to happen on a temporal level as well. So not just sort of making collective bonds, in the now, but doing it, in a multi-generational kind of way. And I think that's sort of urgent for trying to get anything to move around climate change is sort of to make this this relationship to time more intimate and more palpable.
Yeah, I feel actually I think you talk about it in one of your articles about because it's interesting that we talk about scale now and like scale of time as like temporal scale, but we can also talk about time and scale of time in spatial terms. So I think in one of your articles you talk about GPS systems, for instance. I think you could. It would be interesting to hear your perspective on like satellites and like global notion of global time to bring the spatial scale in as well.
Well, I mean, the GPS thing is actually really, I mean, it's sort of a concrete example of where non-experiential time intimately affects how we live. So, you mean the way that, the difference between the flow of time where the satellites exist and flow of time where the phones or whatever it is, because of the distance from the Earth itself, the rate of time actually is different, and this is because of relativity. So this is like something that we have no perception of in any sort of immediate way, but we can comprehend and we understand conceptually enough to build this into our systems. I mean, if it wasn't built into the GPS system, GPS just wouldn't work. I mean, it would throw everything out if this slight difference in time flow, I guess, wasn't calculated for in the relationship between in this distance between the surface of the Earth and where the satellites are. I don't know if that's clear. Sort of basically, it's because gravity changes the rate of how time flows, and the proximity to the source of gravity, i.e., the planet, the Earth. I mean, that's what changes this flow of time. So this is why it's sort of different between these two locations, and it needs to be calculated for, despite it being completely not something we can feel. It's something we're completely embedded in and reliant upon. I mean, all of global logistics is sort of reliant on GPS, for example.
Yeah, so I feel for contemporary like systems of exploitation, like capitalism or repressive political regimes, actually time is a very important category. So you mentioned logistics and like I think contemporary level of like international work outsource, like mega corporations that exist right now, like Amazon, are very based on logistics and like GPS systems. So in this world of like temporal exploitation, I think your point about building intimate connections in time is very right, like very productive. And I wonder if you have any ideas on like how we can build this intimate connection to time and temporality, like how we as humans limited to the notions as you've outlined before of like linear temporality in Western societies, and like temporality on this human scale, how can we go beyond that, like to build like solidarity and intimate relations with each other?
Yeah, I mean that. I mean, I definitely do not have a clear answer for that. I mean, in a way, this is kind of what the research is. I mean, it's one of the aims of the research, I suppose, is trying to think about exactly that. Like, I don't think there is an easy answer. I mean, and of course, you know, I mean, I think one of the questions that I end up running into is something you sort of alluded to, is like the time, the experience of time that I'm referring to is specific within Western culture, sort of coming out of an Enlightenment tradition and this sort of thing. And I understand that there are other cultures that have other relationships to time. And, you know, I think in exploring those would be another valid route for understanding how these solidarities might be built. I mean, it's not the project that I'm working on, but I do think there's something to be said for both looking at sort of the range of cultural experiences and interpretations of time, as well as the you know, what science has to say about time, science across a range of fields of science. But I mean, I think for me, the aim of the research is to really exactly think about Earth system science or physics or whatever that. And I mean, and I don't think, I mean, I don't think I'm going to end up with some clear, you know, list of answers as to how that's going to happen. In a way, I think the whole thing is a much larger project that, you know, I would hope that what I'm working on can contribute to. I mean, I think it has to be like a small part of how these solidarities are built. I think the temporal is part of it, and hopefully it can contribute in some way, but it's certainly not going to be, it's not going to hand over all the answers to this, because I mean, that's an enormous, it's kind of like the question, right? I mean, it's how do we survive ourselves?
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very important political project to pose a question correctly, or like to pose a question in a manner to like allow us to act upon it. And like, so I think your research on time based in asking this question is extremely important. And I think actually, like, I remember you've mentioned in that it might be productive to think of time as a medium through which like processes and like various processes and activities take place. So do you think, because in a moment we're going to switch to your video where you talk more about it, do you think for the audience it might be interesting to like hear about time as a medium?
Well, in a way, I think that too is it sort of feels like early days with that, understanding time as a medium. I mean, in a way, because I mean, on some level, it's going to be very linked to our embeddedness in time. I mean, well, one thing that I haven't mentioned that actually does come up in the video is I mean, it's sort of only alluded to at the end of the video, and in a way, it's sort of separate from the project that I'm working on now. But I do think it's something I would like to return to at some point. I mean, I guess one of the things around these questions for me is like, can we even understand time on time's terms? Like, do we have the capacity to understand time on time's terms? And what I mean by that is, you know, we sort of physiologically evolved to experience time rather than to understand it. Like, there was no evolutionary need for us to comprehend how time actually functions. It doesn't serve us in any way. I mean, experiencing time, you know, recognizing a predator moving towards you. I mean, being able to perceive movement at all is very linked to time, obviously, because things happen, you know, we perceive things happening in sequence. You see a predator running at you, you run in the other direction. You know, I mean, this is sort of evolutionarily built in. There's no evolutionary need to understand how that actually functions outside of our perception. But if there is an interest and a commitment to understanding time outside of our perception, the thing that comes to my mind is would something like artificial intelligence be at all helpful in this? So this isn't really answering your question around medium, I realize that, but it's sort of something I wanted to bring up in relationship to the video before we screened it.
Yeah, if you could introduce the video, it would be helpful, like talk about your residency.
Yeah. Oh yeah, okay, sure. Yeah, I suppose. So, I mean, the video that I think we're going to show, it's a 7-minute double screen video, and it was commissioned by Arts at CERN, and the sound was done by Seth Ayaz, who I worked with here in London. And I mean, it's basically like looking at all of these questions and, making a video work, trying to, as a means to try to understand these questions. And much of the script was taken from Carla Rovelli, who actually was my first interest in the time thing. I actually should mention was Lee Smolin rather than Carla Rovelli. But then Rovelli came out with this book about time a couple years ago that was, very readable and beautiful. Very, very legible for somebody that doesn't have a physics background. So, I mean, despite my interest in physics, I don't have a background in physics. So, my interest is very much as a layperson, and this book was very, it started to look at a lot of these questions and broke down some of these very complicated concepts into ways that, you can be relatively easily understood. I mean, in as much as they can be understood at all, I suppose. So basically, I was looking at Rovelli's work and using this as a lot of the script. I mean, you'll see in it, like, for example, he says things like things are not things are processes. So he makes the claim that even like a mountain is a process rather than a thing, or, these things that seem eternal are themselves processes. Everything is sort of rooted in change and in movement and is sort of embedded in time, as it were. I mean, we could go down lots of different routes about different ideas about time. I mean, there's also things like the block universe, which is not Rovelli's claim, but the video mentions it as well. This idea where everything sort of already exists, and so the idea of memory, for example, is something that belongs to a particular moment in time. Like the experience of memory is part of a particular moment rather than a recollection of a previous moment, if you see what I mean. I don't know if I'm being clear about that. But anyway, so this video was done as part of this residency with Arts at CERN. So, the giant particle collider in Switzerland, they have a residency that you can apply for. And I, applied year after year and was rejected year after year. And finally they said, yes, you can come, please stop harassing us. And it was amazing. And I was only there for a few days, but I do hope to go back. But, got to see the big old underground machines and talk to various scientists there. And actually the video was made before my visit. So in a way it was sort of made backwards in a way, but I still think I'm going to be working from some of the interviews and conversations I had from the visit itself. So that will be subsequent works.
Yes, so let's screen the video now.
Okay.
Yeah.
On it goes.
nice to rewatch it. Yeah.
I have to say, I hope the sound came through okay. It was a bit glitchy in my perception. I hope it comes through okay. And even the version of it on Vimeo doesn't really do full justice to it. Seth did an amazing job with the sound, and when it's actually installed, it's very directional. Like he's got like 4 speakers set up, and it sort of moves around the room and that sort of thing. So I feel like I have to say, somewhat in Seth's defense, I don't think you get the full whack of sound, so to speak. When watching it on a screen, but you get the idea.
Yeah. I think so. We got the idea that the nature of time is like alien, in fact. And I think we can like slowly move towards like your main concept, which is like xenotemporality. So my question would be, what does the notion of xeno present to you as a like researcher and an artist? Because initially you've been working with Hester on the notion of xenofeminism. And so what does this notion of xeno brings to xenofeminism? And it would be amazing if you could outline productive aspects of the xeno as conceptual lens, common for both xenofeminism and xenotemporality, while also highlighting the autonomy of both concepts, because it's very important to see the xenotemporality as something autonomous, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, the xenofeminist project, I think, in a way, is, I suppose, developed as a kind of a series of conceptual tools, and I think from those tools, sort of xenotemporality kind of evolved, I suppose. So, I mean, I think the idea, when we first were putting together this text, the xenofeminist text, five years ago now, I was one of the 6 that was actually quite resistant to this idea of xeno, actually, because I didn't really know what it meant. I was like, I'm not sure about this alienation thing, because how do we want this to function? The immediate association with alienation is of something bad, and sort of, being alienated from a society or from, a collective or something like this. And, in a way, it seems like the opposite of what we want to do. But, I think over time, in part because I was a bit resistant to the idea, I really felt compelled to dive into it. I mean, aside from my affection for all things alien on a personal level, which is, being a long-standing science fiction fan, and, all this sort of thing, and all this sort of, more pop senses of the word alien. I mean, that's sort of, I'm a long-standing fan. But that aside, trying to understand what this could mean as a, as being politically productive, I think sort of became my goal, coming out of writing this, bombastic manifesto with these other 5 women. The work that came out of it was really trying to analyze what this would mean. And I think over time, what became clear to me was that what it enables is allowing us to think about, to think thought outside of experience, and it's, I think, important for, like, in a lineage of feminism, because so much of feminism had been rooted in the body, and so much about the body, and so much about personal experience. And I think, to be clear, it was never a project to sort of undo that, or to sort of say that to denigrate that in any way. I still think that work is really important. I think, I feel forever indebted to various waves of feminism and all forms, maybe not all forms, but many forms of feminism. And, I'm very an advocate of building solidarity with them. So it's by no means to denigrate it, but I think part of feminism needs to be the fact that we have the capacity for reason. I mean, women, as much as men, obviously have the capacity for reason and have the capacity to think and have, the capacity to understand things outside of experience. And in a way, this relates back to what I was talking before about the xenotemporality, is like the need to be able to understand things that we can't experience. And both because of what the world has become, partly by design and partly by, accident, sort of. I mean, maybe not accident, but this Bratton's term of the accidental megastructure. I mean, I think that sort of is a relevant term here. This idea that we've constructed this, this thing that we don't quite know how to draw, but less we're careening down the highway in it. To come to terms, just maybe draw permit of this accidental megastructure, we need to be able to think outside of experience, because we don't have the capacity to experience the scales on which we now operate. So this is relevant for feminism, absolutely, as a political project. And then it evolves into this idea. I mean, in a way, the xenotemporality has evolved out of the thinking that I've done around what does the xeno mean in relation to xenofeminism. The xenotemporality has enabled me to sort of take time in a way as sort of a subset of how this idea of alienation be productive. So the alienation is like so it's between the experience of being in a body and sort of experiencing life, and then being able to think things that are outside of that experience. So this is where the alienation is. So it's not between an individual and society or individual and their group or something like this. It's not a felt alienation. It's this alienation between what we can think and what we can experience. And this is useful as a tool to think through something like temporality for some of the reasons I was saying before, because of these issues of scale.
Yeah, I also think that xenotemporality in it's using the perception of alien allows us to think of the time loops. So I would love you to talk more about the notion of hyperstation and hyperstation as a concept, and the role of hyperstation for your 2038 project.
Yeah. I mean, it was around, I think it's even mentioned in the manifesto. I mean, it's sort of, I think Mark Fisher was the one to actually coin the term, but it sort of came out of CCRU, Cybernetic Cultural Research Unit, which was a philosophy research group, I guess, in Warwick in the 90s, in the University of Warwick here in the UK in the 90s. And I think for CCRU, I think it always sort of had these more sort of almost mystical feelings or sort of sense around it of the future arching back and creating the present, so that somehow time had an agency, like time itself had a will, and there was, and in a way, this is, there's something kind of sexy and exciting about thinking about that. It is very science fiction in a way, but I was interested in looking at this and thinking okay, well, let's lose the mysticism of it, because it's not really what I'm interested in. I mean, I'm interested in it in a sort of fictional way, but actually as a political project, I think there is something to this hyperstation. But what does it mean if you don't really buy the mystical nonsense? And I think you can see it operating in things like finance, and it's project. And I have to admit, I think this comes from Suha Malik, an article he wrote a number of years ago about derivatives, and finance is definitely not my territory, so I'm not going to be able to speak on it that eloquently. But this idea of, making financial predictions about the price of something in the future then affects how that price actually exists in the now. So it is this case of the future acting on the present and in fact creating the present. And, and thinking about this across a range of things. So I think this is curious for me, like what ways can you actually affect the future? If you project these versions of the future that then sort of end up bringing themselves into being, again, not in some sort of mystical, magical way that they have agency, but actually, these projections of the future have enough force that they are worth committing to and worth sort of making real. And this is sort of where the 2038 project comes in. So Christopher Roth made a film called Hyperstation in 2015, and it was actually filmed at this philosophy event in Berlin called the Summer School, Berlin School. Oh crap! I can't actually remember the full name of it. Anyway, but it was this 2-week event where, which is where the Laboratory Cubonics group formed, that wrote the Xenofeminist manifesto. That's where we met. Was at this event. I wasn't myself there for the whole 2 weeks. I was able to sort of sneak in for the last few days, but it was, a series of people talking about, broadly speaking, sort of, I guess, accelerationism, neo-rationalist philosophy, whatever that means, sort of the fringes of speculative realism, again, a sort of disavowed sort of school of thought, but actually, I mean, that's a whole other conversation that we could have about what speculative realism is. But anyway, Christopher Roth made a film called Hyperstation that documented this event and actually sort of started to enact this thing of hyperstation. So part of the film itself, he interviewed Suhail Malik again, and he's in the year 2026, I believe, talking retrospectively about this film Hyperstation, and it sort of acts as this active self-referential act of hyperstation. So that the film itself talks about itself in the past tense, kind of bringing itself into being. And so, Roth did this in the Hyperstation film, and I think what he's doing now with the 2038 project is a more, I suppose, a more ambitious act of hyperstation. So to explain what the project is, it's the German pavilion for the Venice Architecture Biennale, which was supposed to be 2020. It was supposed to be up now, but due to coronavirus, it's been put off for a year. And I think it might even be called 2039 now. I'm not sure if the whole thing's moved on here or what, but the idea is that you get a bunch of people working across a range of fields, speaking retrospectively about how we got. So the idea is that by 2038, we've sort of sorted it out. Like we've built solidarity, we have systems that work. We're not that everything is perfect, but that we sort of pulled ourselves out of the sort of the downward trajectory that we seem to be in 2019, 2020. I mean, of course, the project was conceived before coronavirus, and understanding what a global pandemic is going to mean for how we both envision and construct the future is, I mean, maybe that's a much bigger project, but nonetheless, the 2038 project is still happening in this mode of getting people to speak about how this better future came to be, but in a retrospective way. So like, this is how, you'll have interviews with, various people working in artificial intelligence or whatever, sort of saying, this is what happened. And then when this crash happened in this year, then we did this. And so it sort of explains how we got there. And this I sort of see as an active project of hyperstation, this idea of projecting a particular future that functions and essentially just making convincing versions of how to have a better future. And if those convincing enough, they can in fact be taken up and sort of plant a seed in a popular imagination. So I'm getting messages that my internet is unstable. I hope you can still see me and hear me okay.
Yeah. Can you maybe show a bit of your work from the project?
Yeah. So just to introduce that briefly. Yeah. So what my role in it is to sort of make these very short videos for Instagram. So I'm more or less running their Instagram account, and it was supposed to be only through November. I think we're still sort of figuring out just how this is all going to play out, since it's an extra year and a half or whatever. But yeah, so there's a series of very short videos on German Pavilion Venice, some of which are just reassembled work of Christopher. Some of it is stuff made originally, specifically for the Instagram site. I think everything I'm showing here, the first one is the first one we're going to show. I think the bulk of it is taken from Christopher's trailer. The second and third one, are something I put together independently. And when I say second and third, they're very short. They're all like 30 seconds. So don't take it as an opportunity to go get a cup of tea. It's not going to last that long. But yeah, maybe we should go to those videos. Yeah, so you can see they're very, very quick. They're meant to be watched on a phone, on a scroll, on the bus, whatever. When we used to go on buses back in the day, and the last one, for example, was made just at the start of lockdown. So this idea that we don't believe in the lonely genius is trying to the whole 2038 project is like there's a whole slew of people working on it. So I was talking about Christopher mostly. There's like 4 leads to it, but then there's a whole team of people working quite collaboratively on the project. So I think it's this way of working across, like nobody really has exclusive authorship of it. And being proponents of this way of working. I mean, that's more a methodological question than a content question, but I think it's one that I'm a fan of anyway. I think more and more everything I do is collaborative to some extent. Even the research, especially the research, I suppose, is extremely collaborative. So yeah.
Yeah, I have one last question, and then we give a word to Katya to introduce the questions from the audience. So I assume if some of you who is watching the live stream right now have questions, please write them. So my last question would be connecting to the Hyperstation. Mm-hmm. So in my practice, for instance, I deal with Hyperstations through the web platform. Like I've done a web platform on the project of Crimean Bridge, which is the project of Russian colonialism that is meant to manifest the annexation of Crimea. So I made a deepfake with Putin And I feel like in non-democratic regimes, like political wise, the time stops. Like there is no temporality outside of the like Putin as a president. In the sense of politics, like it's total contingency, impossible to imagine it. So I made a video where Putin has like totally different narrative and speaks from his name in a totally different narrative from himself. But it kind of brings the idea of the practice and like temporality of practice. And I think it's very interesting what you do with the Instagram and especially like Hyperstation, bringing in Hyperstation. And I wanted to give you a chance to talk about like the temporality of your durational artwork, like how you work with the web platforms, like what you're working on now, how does the medium of web platform itself help you, or like how do you perceive it basically?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think this is my thinking about the Instagram project in general is that it's those with different attention span, because it's like long durational artwork. I think of it as like one thing, the 9 months or whatever it was meant to be, that it's a single artwork, but who has time for a 9-month artwork anymore? We've got 30 seconds, and frankly, I mean, I feel the same. I quite like a 30-second artwork because my attention span also is sometimes slips. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I on some level, doing longer research projects, there's something really lovely to have a chance to. I mean, I've just started this sort of research at Westminster University, and to know that I've got 4 years to really dive into this research is such a treat. I mean, it's so rare that you get this chunk of time to really focus on something. So, I mean, there is like that temporality, but again, 4 years is like nothing, right? It's like, I feel like, I don't know. I mean, I guess this is the experience of temporality, is it like it stretches and goes back and forth, and especially in downtime. I mean, March feels like, 20 years ago on one level and 2 minutes on another, But I mean, I don't know if I'm allowed to do this. I'm curious to know more about how time stops in dictatorial regimes. Am I allowed to turn the questions around?
I hope we would have enough time. I mean, probably people from the audience would have a lot of feedback on that, actually. But it's quite, it's quite funny though, because now, I mean, probably a lot of you know what's happening in Belarus right now. So it's quite interesting how like people in Belarus actually bring back time in question for like other countries in post-Soviet space. Because I mean, even I remember myself only when like Putin is a president. So I don't have any memory, like as well as my friends from Belarus, I don't have any memory of like political change or like something interesting happening in official politics. Like the only interesting thing that happens in Russia during elections is all oppositional parties barking at each other about why exactly there is nothing changes, but nothing changes. Like years pass. And the regime is still the same.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to like imagine like what would happen, like what if. And it was actually very interesting making a deep fake, because when you hear Putin say nonsensical stuff or like stuff that he would never say, like Putin saying word colonialism actually created like in a very tangible manner like some radical imagination for myself, like what it would be if my president would accept or acknowledge the colonial history and presence of my country, like what if like all of these questions somehow become very embodied in this like experience of like deep fake hyperstation, if it makes sense. And especially, yeah, right. So like in the West, I feel there is like some, I don't know, a lot of stuff like US elections, right? Everyone is talking about US elections whenever they happen. So there is a lot of like things to be done, and like, I mean, I was following like Bernie Sanders' Instagram just like as a wholesome activity on the weekend, right? But what if like the country is monopolized by like one face? Like what if like the time, like the lifespan, it's like something changes every time in the like, I don't know, in the loss of hope for like temporality switch? Anyway, I would give the mic to Katya now to get the questions from the audience.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Diann. Thank you for the conversation. It was very interesting to listen to you. And I would like to start with one question. I think it is mostly to Diann, since you've mentioned, you've spoken on the notion of time and how you experience it just a few minutes ago. How have the quarantine changed the sensing of time for you, and how do you show it in your artwork?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I think not that much, really. I mean, it hasn't affected it that much, only because, in a way, what I'm most interested in time is this sort of the extremities of scale. So,
thank you.
I love them.
And there's also one last question from our audience, which is, why do people seem to like the notion of forever in the context of temporality of our lives?
Oh God, why do people like the notion of forever?
Yes.
God, I suppose it's, I don't know. It's very romantic, isn't it? I guess. I don't know. I don't know. It's a funny question. I've never really thought about it. I suppose it's just like some romantic pull. I mean, if you actually think about it, God, what a condemnation to be around forever. Jesus Christ. And can you imagine all the humans, like if we all stuck around even longer? God. Like, we were taken over the place even more than we have. I mean, I don't know. I don't think I'm a big fan of the idea of forever myself. So it's hard for me to speculate as to why people, other than just a romantic notion, kind of hang on to that as an idea. It's probably just fear of death in some ways as well,
And also maybe
primal.
I can make use of it as like example to explain the difference between like transhumanism and posthumanism. And because I mean, you know what I mean? Like the notion of forever as like, you can imagine it like being masculine, expansive idea of like extending your appearance, not only in space, but also in time. Like I have the right as a human to live forever, and I can extend myself either in physical domain or in digital domain. All these ideas of like, not necessarily biohacking, but biohacking for the sense of like eternal life, without taking into consideration the already collapse in ecology and all of these other things. Whereas the notion of posthumanism, that I think, Diann, correct me if I'm wrong, xenofeminism relates to, is to problematize the place of human and non-human and their relationship with each other. So instead of extending yourself into like non-human domain, or like in the non-human temporality of forever, the post-human project allows for locating yourself rather than extending. So instead of wanting to live forever, you're problematizing what forever means and what is your place in it, if I can say like this. So, and also, I mean, maybe you can also, I feel, maybe alien phenomenology, like as a concept for like, would be productive, because the notion of forever actually comes in place when there's a lot of contingency and like the like high frequency trading and all this stuff in our lives that are like operating on non-human temporality, like makes us seek for this like sometimes conservative forever. So maybe like alien can bring us to like some other worlds.
Yeah, no, I think it's fantastically well said. I mean, I think this distinction between, post and transhumanism and sort of the politics of them both. I mean, I think they can easily get confused if you're not, spending a lot of time with these terms. But I do think there's a stark difference between them, and I think you articulated it really well. I suppose, which is why I said my instinct around this idea of forever is like, no, forget it. It's like, I wouldn't hang on to it. It seems a disaster.
Thank you. Anna, Diann, thank you very much for the talk, and thank you for your answers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This lecture will stay...
Yeah, it was really enjoyable.
Yeah,
Same.
for us also. This lecture will stay on YouTube and all Strelka social platforms, hopefully not forever. Please follow us there and check out Strelka.com for more events. And thank you everybody for watching us today. Bye.